So I'd like to hear your statement on that, because you talked about a slippery slope and they are hitting deeper into Russia. Is it possible that Russia would actually strike targets in Western Europe?
Well, there are a number of opinions in our discussions. By the way, there are a lot of polar views from specialists, from those who are involved in the decision making. We have a very vibrant society, unlike claims that are being made that everybody who is speaking out in Russian public sphere is representing Putin's view or whatever. It's absolutely not true. So there are people who are really appealing and requesting that we should strike the decision-making centers. One of them is Mr. Karaganov. His position on the acceptability of usage of tactical nuclear weapons is not something new. It has been there for some time, a couple of years at least, as far as I understand. We have also Deputy Head of the Security Council, Mr. Medvedev, who usually expresses very radical views. I think it's normal for a society when there are different voices from other places saying sometimes polar things. It's on the one hand. On the other hand, well, I would agree with Scott that Europeans are overplayed this thing a little bit, and they are opening one after another the so-called overtone windows, if you know what I mean. So they try to test our resolve. They try to test the threshold where we would respond. And this is a very dangerous game. Again, it seems to us that we are now the only responsible adult player on in the continent, because everybody else they try to behave either in a childish or in a foolish way, and absolutely they don't have any responsibility before the societies that they represent. It's not a computer game, it's not a simulation, it's a serious thing. We demonstrate that we have all the means to make our response very painful. That would be really a big blow to those who are our adversaries and who insist that they are our adversaries. We leave the doors for diplomacy open. They were open from the outset, and we were repeatedly stating that we prefer a diplomatic way to solve the crisis in and around Ukraine, but nobody wanted to listen. Well, I would say that there is a big public demand right now to do something resolute, to show to our adversaries that Russia is ready to fight, that Russia will not make any concessions on its vital interests. The question right now is not about not so much about the territory, I would say, which some people would say, and territory is a matter only because these regions that are in questions are part of Russia according to our constitution, and of course it is logical that we want to have their entirety by military or diplomatic means, which is our preference. The question is how the remainder of Ukraine, the Ukraine that would come out of this conflict, how it will look like, and what will be the norms, what will be the principles of functioning of this society, because it's absolutely out of question that this society will remain in the same nationalistic, neo-Nazi, anti-Russian, Russophobic shape. This is the key issue, and I think that is the question that our European colleagues leave aside. When it comes to the true colors of the Zelensky regime, they just pretend that nothing is happening. They don't think that they need to insist on Ukraine to correct anything. But the fact is that Ukraine is the only country in the world which officially banned another language, the Russian language, despite the provisions of its constitution which guarantee the liberty of choosing Russian language for Russian speakers who represent the majority of the population. Still, there is not another country that behaves itself like this. Israel is not banning Arabic. Palestine is not banning Hebrew. United States is not banning Persian. Iran is not banning English. I think this is the only country that decided to behave in this way is Ukraine, and this is very emblematic for this regime which started its war against Russian-speaking population, which started its Russophobic campaign and which became a mere tool in the hands of the West. And now we are fighting with the West. And the moment when it will be a direct confrontation with the West is approaching very much, and that's what I'm calling the slippery slope.
And that's actually what I wanted to go down that path. I know we're running low on time, but this is crucial here, because I have talked to a number of folks in both the United States and in Europe, and certainly have read other public comments. And it is very clear when you look at the arc of this 4+ years of war now, is that there was a lot of concern at the beginning from the West that there could be an escalation, that if we did too much military help to Ukraine, it could cause Russia to potentially expand beyond the borders. And, everything was done. First, it was artillery pieces, and then later it turned into tanks and other armored personnel, then lots of long-range missiles. Every time there was some concern that Russia would do something, they never did. And then it was F-16s. Early in the war, President Biden said, you know what, if it's F-16s, we're not going to do that because that's World War III. Well, you saw years later, they did use F-16s and they put them in, and it didn't cause World War III. So now the view is there's literally nothing that Russia, there's no red lines for Russia. As long as it stays inside of Ukraine, the West has definitely got a freedom, in my observation, that there's nothing that Russia will ever do. But you're talking again about a slippery slope and a confrontation between East and West. And so therefore I will ask, is it possible that Russia could at some point change that dynamic and say there is a cost, there is a red line, and we're going to strike something in Europe? Is that possible?
Well, that's exactly the question that many people are asking. And I believe that many people in the West, unfortunately, they confuse our humanity and our desire to avoid devastating moves for the West. They confuse it with weakness. And they say if Russia doesn't react, it's because Russia is weak. No, Russia doesn't react because Russia is humane, because Russia is thinking about the future of the humanity, of those European citizens who will be absolutely devastated by the consequences of this conflict. That's why we're hesitating. It's a serious matter to proceed. But believe me, if it affected really our vital interests, I don't think we will hesitate, and everybody should absolutely remember this. I know that my leadership, my military leadership, has a lot of cards to play still militarily, and if it doesn't use the cards that you mentioned, the means that you mentioned, then there are reasons for this. But I'm absolutely sure that there will be no hesitation, we will not lose time if it comes to the situation when we will have to use what we need to use in such cases. And it's according to our nuclear doctrine. It is open for everybody. Everybody knows when and in what circumstances these weapons will be used.
Now, I know you're certainly not going to give any military secrets out over our channel here or commit your government to anything, but in the event that the decision makers in Moscow said, all right, that's it, you've gone too far, they crossed whatever red line is set in the Kremlin, and now then we're going to do something, would we expect to see some sort of, I don't know if it's an ultimatum or something from Moscow that says, all right, if this doesn't change, we're going to do this? Or would it be, no, you're just going to wake up one day and a missile is going to land somewhere and there won't be any advance warning? How might that happen?
Well, I would just advise everybody I would advise against testing the limits of our patience and the limits of our self-restraint. The fact that NATO is now directly involved in war against Russia by providing airspace to Ukrainian drones, by placing the production of drones, of other warfare in their territory, I think it brings us very, very close to this conflict, which again will have very devastating consequences for European population. And I think that European population is not aware of this. It's being brainwashed, and they are hearing arguments like the ones that you cited, that Russia will never dare use anything against Europe. I wouldn't be so sure, because Europe has used everything against Russia right now. Europe is providing weapons to Ukraine. They provide the missiles that can be used only with the approval and under the control of specialists from the United Kingdom, Great Britain, France, whoever. So I think that they have already crossed all the red lines, and it's a matter of time if it continues like this. And then people will ask questions, so what did we do? Why did Russia respond so harshly and so resolutely? But it will be too late.